Okay guys, welcome back to the second video in the series for Unit 2 Outcome 3. And this one today we're looking at the identification of staffing needs. Okay, so the usual, or what will become the usual snapshot of the study design for you here. So that just highlights the key knowledge dot point in the study design that we're talking about today. Identification of staffing needs of the business, such as the knowledge, skills, and ideas that staff can contribute to the business. So that's what this is all about. Now, we'll talk about establishing our business, okay? This is the whole of Unit 2. The whole of Unit 2 is about establishing. So Unit 1 was planning our business. Unit 2, we're establishing. So we're kind of starting and getting our business up and running. So now this whole outcome 3 is obviously all about the staffing of the business. Now, before we even kind of begin that process, there's a couple of things that we need to be thinking about. First off, how many staff we're going to need. And secondly, what are the skills, the knowledge, the experience, the qualifications, all this sort of stuff. Are those staff that we're going to be hiring, what are they going to need to bring to the table? What do they need to bring with them for us to operate our business effectively and meet our objectives? Now, we need to know those things as we plan our business. So, as we're sort of getting ready to open and set the business up, but we also need to be doing this kind of throughout the whole life of the business as well. So this isn't just like a one-off activity we do. This is just kind of an ongoing process that should be going on kind of in the background throughout the entire life of the business. But certainly it starts at this kind of establishing the business kind of phase. And this whole process is called human resource planning, or probably more commonly, workforce planning. That's the two terms that are used to just describe this entire process we're talking about, which, like I say, happens at the beginning of the business, but then also is a continual process while we're operating our business. And a definition of workforce planning, really just the process of identifying current and future employee needs for our business. Okay, so workforce planning. To operate successfully, a business needs to have an adequate supply of competent and motivated people who are available to perform the duties and tasks required to meet the objectives of the business. Now, if we don't have any one of those things, we need the adequate supply is a key thing. They've got to be available. In fact, available is also in there. If they're not available, then we can't bring them into the business. They need to be competent. And again, our job is to make sure that we're hiring people who are competent enough to do the jobs that we need them to do. And they need to be motivated. Now, that's kind of, some people will come with some kind of intrinsic motivation anyway, but actually when we move on to we look at motivation in year 12 when we talk about managing employees more specifically. Motivation is a big thing we look at there. So that's something we can kind of manage to some extent once we have the employees on board. But basically, if this process does not happen, the business is not going to meet its objectives. Simple as. So look, just coming back to that key knowledge dot point, I'm just focusing more specifically now on the second part of it, where it says the knowledge, skills, and ideas part of it. So kind of what are we talking about here? Now, new employees, when they come into the business, they're going to bring knowledge, they're going to bring skills and potentially bring ideas with them, okay? So what you need to think about is where these employees are coming from and how all of those knowledge, skills, and ideas can benefit the business. And this is kind of maybe not as straightforward and as simple as it might at first kind of appear. So number one you could think about is, do you want to bring employees in from competitors of yours? There might be some benefits to doing that because they would understand the industry. They would probably understand kind of how the business might work. And they might even, a definite advantage of bringing in people from competing businesses is that they might have ideas that worked in that business that could kind of translate into yours. So, when you're running a business, you tend to kind of get this real tunnel vision, and it's kind of hard to really sometimes think about. You're so focused on running the business, sometimes you're not thinking about your processes and what you're doing, to kind of maybe sit back and look at it and go, okay, could we do things better? Whereas if you bring somebody in from a competing business, sometimes they could come in and they've got fresh eyes, they're looking at the business from a different perspective, and they could go, look, this is great how we do this process, but in the business I just came from, this is how we did it, and it worked really well for us. So there's that kind of benefit. It might be that you definitely do not want to bring in people from competitors. A lot of businesses, they kind of have very much a defined way of doing things that they think is maybe different from the competitors. And sometimes the feeling is that it's kind of hard to untrain the habits that an employee might have learned in a competing business, and get them doing things the way that you want them to do. Certainly in my day in McDonald's 25 odd years ago, back in the UK, that was definitely true. Like when we were hiring staff, we actually didn't want to take people that had worked in the competing fast food restaurants, because McDonald's do have a very specific way. There's a process for everything. It's very black and white, very detailed. And if somebody came in that had been working maybe for Burger King down the road, Hungry Jacks as they are here, they had different ways to do things. And sometimes they would bring those habits, and it was really kind of hard for them to unlearn those habits and get into the McDonald's. It was kind of easy just to take people who kind of had no experience and just train them in the McDonald's way. And I've worked for businesses that kind of went for either one of these slants. Sometimes it was good to bring in people from competitors, and other businesses I work for kind of prefer to not do that. So that's one consideration. You're gonna look at people from competitors. Another kind of a more broad thing here is bringing new employees into the business. Here's a real opportunity to take advantage of the diversity, particularly in Australia, that we just have within the community. So, look at bringing in different genders, different backgrounds, different ethnicities, different ages. I might talk on that one in a short while. But by bringing in such a diverse mix of people, can really kind of promote creativity and innovation, and with different perspectives, different ways of looking at the business and contributing new ideas that if you just kind of recruited one type of person, you might not kind of be exposed to. So there's definitely a lot of value in kind of promoting diversity in the workplace and trying to create as much of a diverse workplace as you possibly can. Now, I'm just going to do here, this is more kind of aimed at how answering some of the questions that you might come onto. And this is summing up maybe some of the stuff we've already looked at here. But workforce planning, factors or considerations, basically things that you need to think about when you are going through this process of workforce planning. So this is just sort of, to an extent, summarizing some of the points that we've already made, but talking about one or two things in a little more detail as well. So there's a couple of things that you could use here. If you are asked in a question to discuss or describe some of the factors or some of the considerations that you might need to think about when you are going through the workforce planning process, that's what this is all about. So first thing you need to think about, what are the skills, the knowledge, the experience that you're going to need within your business, both now, in the short run, in the immediate future, but also much further down the track, into the long run. The further that you can plan ahead with your workforce planning, the much smoother a ride it's going to be. And this is going to be built into or built around, your plans for the business. How quickly are you planning to expand? Where are you planning to expand? And kind of the more foresight and the more knowledge you have about that into the future, the better the chance you've got of doing some more accurate planning into the future. And as with any planning, the better you can plan, the longer into the future you can plan, the more chance that the plans are going to kind of come to fruition and work. So that's the first thing to think about. Second thing I just touched on before, diversity. How can we benefit our business by creating a more diverse workplace? And there's definitely a lot of value in that, particularly in a country like Australia, where there is so much diversity just within the community. Let's make the most of that, take advantage of it, and within our business just have a lot of different kind of opinions coming from people with different backgrounds, different experiences can be really, really valuable. Generation expectations. I guess this is kind of a subset of the diversity just before, but it's worth being aware. There's kind of three generations in the current Australian workforce. You've got the baby boomers at the top end. You've got the Generation X. I sit right in the middle of Generation X. And then you've got the millennials kind of bringing up the rear. So the younger ones entering the workforce. So you need to be aware of the differences, certainly when you're hiring people for the different generations. We're not going to go into a huge amount of detail here, but basically there's a lot of benefits of hiring baby boomers over millennials, but there are also some negatives to that as well. And similar with each of the generations, there's basically advantages and disadvantages that you need to kind of take into account when you are hiring people into your business. And I would suggest probably, ideally, for a lot of businesses, it would be good to have a mix. Again, for the same reason as diversity, so you've got people with different experiences. Like if you have all millennials, no one with a bit of age and experience behind them, you're kind of missing out on potentially some valuable kind of intuitions that those millennials are not going to have. If you're going just for the baby boomers, maybe you're lacking on that in enthusiasm and energy that the younger generations might bring. So there's lots and lots written about what the different generations bring to the workplace and how you need to manage them. But just for now, just being aware of the different generational expectations that they have of the workplace as well is something to be aware of, what they're going to bring to the table. So there's a third factor or consideration that you might be thinking about. And then finally, you need to also be thinking about factors in the external environment. And you think we go back to our environments of business, we've got the macro environment surrounding the business, which is external, and the operating environment, and then the internal environment, which is the business itself. So think about things that are going on outside of your business, which could impact somehow on your capacity to staff your business. So look, one really obvious example sitting here right now is how COVID has impacted certain regions of Australia. So I was watching the news the other night, and a lot of farms out in country Victoria, and definitely this has been a big issue up in Queensland in the fruit picking and also the tourism industries, tourism and hospitality, because of COVID and because of closure of borders, and I'm talking international borders, but also state borders. The farms that need fruit pickers don't have the backpackers that they usually would have that pick the fruit. So they're basically leaving fruit to just rot on the branch or in the ground or however it grows. And they're losing hundreds of thousands of dollars because they're not able to recruit the staff, because the whole COVID thing and border closures has put a block on them having access to the staff that they need. And same with leisure and hospitality and tourism and travel up in Queensland, the Gold Coast, the likes of the Sunny Coast, Port Douglas. I was up in Port Douglas in the last holidays, and a lot of places were either closed or only open part of the time because they just did not have the staff to run their business like they normally would, because again, they rely on a lot of either foreign backpackers or other people from other parts of Australia coming up, and the seasonal workers. So you need to think about that. Sometimes we have shortages in certain industries. For whatever reason, there will be a shortage of a certain type of employee or a certain type of person that work in a business. So again, you need to be aware when you're doing your workforce planning, the kind of people that you're going to need in the future, and be keeping an eye on it. And there's ways that you can do this we don't need to go into, but you need to be aware if there's going to be staff shortages coming up, because then that's a big issue that you're going to have. You need to come up with strategies to kind of get around that. How are you going to find the staff that you need if there are staff shortages? And we actually talk later in this outcome about international recruitment, finding staff overseas, which kind of is one of the solutions to this issue. Okay, so look, one final thing I just want to talk about in this video, again, with the mind of answering some of the questions that you're going to come across. And it's the answer to why is workforce planning so important? Why is it so important to get this process right and really kind of, like I said before, have it kind of bubbling in the background all of the time, and just always kind of front of mind, so that we're always thinking about this, okay? First off, the process itself takes a lot of time, a lot of effort, and a lot of money to get the right people in. Okay, recruitment costs. We'll move on to recruitment in a short while. Recruitment is a very expensive process to get through. It takes a lot of time, interviewing candidates and looking at CVs, this sort of stuff. So it's a really, really expensive and time-consuming process, the whole of workforce planning, recruiting people into your business and making sure you're getting it right. A wrong hire, even more expensive. For a start, you've just wasted all the costs of recruitment on a person that didn't work out. While that person is in the business, they might have not been as productive as someone if you'd have made the right hire in the first place. So there's costs there. They may have, just having the wrong person in the business, depends on what the reason is, but they may have just been putting other staff offside, which causes issues. Making the wrong hire is an absolute disaster in a business, particularly I would say when the business is kind of small. If you've only got 2 or 3 people in your business, that next one individual person can obviously have an impact. If there's 100 people in a business, that one wrong hire, obviously the amount of damage that one person could do is more limited, but still you want to be getting the right hires, get the right people in the first place. And if we don't get the right people in, we're not going to achieve our objectives. I mean, we've said that right from the beginning. That links back to the previous key knowledge. It's so important to staff our business correctly with the right people if we are going to achieve our objectives at all. And that basically is it for that video, guys. So key knowledge 2 done there. I will see you in the next video for key knowledge 3. Cheers for now.